Hi, this is Dave with Market Trading Concepts, closing out the week for Friday, August the 3rd, 2012. It is Sunday, August the 5th as I record this video. So let's start out as we always do with the Dow Futures on the daily chart. Now, if you want to watch an instrument that tracks the Dow Futures, you can look at the diamonds or the DIA ETF, simply DIA ticker symbol, and it pretty closely tracks the Dow Futures. So having a look at the Dow Futures, we were looking last week and the week before, and I believe the week before, for a test of these highs. We didn't quite get up there yet, but as you can see, we pulled back several times, and we had this structure in place that we've been talking about with the higher highs and the higher lows. And we've been putting in this structure, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low. We pulled back into this this area of symmetry at 12,444. And what we mean by symmetry is, you know, the distance from this higher high to this higher low. They've been pretty much the same. These pullbacks have been about the same amount, the same distance. So we pulled right back into that level, 12,444. These moves were all symmetrical, and then we pushed higher again, and we pushed above this higher high. So we still have a bullish structure in place. We still have a bullish structure in place, in my opinion, and we still have a series of higher highs and higher lows. So now we have this higher high in place, pushing above these highs. We put in a higher low right at this level here at the top of this trend line, or the top of this wedge pattern where the white trend line is, and then we pushed off, and we had a really strong day on Friday. We had a really strong day on Friday, and you can see we pushed just above these highs. We pushed just above those highs, but we didn't really get much above them. But the important thing to note is we closed right at the highs. So you can see we closed really strong right at the highs. That's not to say we're not going to pull back, you know, going into Monday or Tuesday or any time into next week. But this was a really, really strong close on Friday. The path of least resistance, in my opinion, is still to the upside. And in my opinion, we've effectively retested these highs. I mean, we could push back up into these areas. So at this point in time, I'm just going to move the chart out a little bit, you know, zoom the chart out a little bit. At this point in time, what I was looking for, I think it's kind of close enough. It's already taken place. Now, we could come all the way up to, let's see, we closed at 13,055. I was ultimately looking for a retest of around 13,200 or 13,200 and around 240. So I'm looking for another 200 points of upside. That's what I was expecting. And it could still happen. Once we get to these highs, honestly, I really don't even have an opinion on what's going to happen. I'm going to be watching it closely to see. I really don't have a bias if we push right up into these highs. A couple of things could happen. These are a few scenarios I'm looking for, but I don't really have an opinion or a bias on what it's going to do. So I'll be looking for it to maybe come up here, push through a little bit, maybe get rejected, pull back, and put in a higher low. That's one scenario. That's one scenario. The other scenario is that we could push through, and there could be a lot of stop orders up here for people who have been short the market for a while that ultimately place their stops above these highs, and then we could just get a blow off. We could get a blow off right through there, triggering all those stops, all those shorts who have to effectively cover their positions or buy back their positions. That could cause some volatility to the upside. So that's another potential scenario. At this point in time, I really don't know. So I'm going to be watching these levels closely if we get a retest of them. If we get a pullback, into early into next week, I'll be looking for it to sort of hold this trend line possibly. If we're going to resume the trend higher, hold the 21 EMA as it moves up, hold the trend line, and see if we can, you know, keep a higher low structure in place, and then push, and then push off to the high side. At this point in time, I'm just going to be watching the market carefully because things can get pretty wacky as we approach previous price highs. So anything could really happen there. I've pointed out a couple of scenarios, and I'll just be watching it closely to see what happens. Taking a look at the S&P futures on the daily chart as well. The S&P futures, if you want to take a look at the something that tracks it very closely in the cash session, would be the SPY ETF. So simply ticker symbol SPY. So this looks very much similar to the Dow Futures, except that we kind of pushed through these highs and we closed a little bit stronger than the Dow Futures. I think the Dow Futures are, I think they're basically, they're in pretty much the same position. I mean, you've got these highs up here around 1411, 1412. I don't think it would be unreasonable now that we're getting up into some of these levels that these areas should be almost like a magnet. The market will probably be looking for liquidity in those areas and will probably come up and test them. You know, it's almost like a magnet. We still have this structure in place with the trending indicator. It's still putting in higher peaks. So everything looks pretty good from a market structure perspective. You know, we've got this stair-stepping pattern still in effect. So the S&P futures look very much like the Dow Futures. Let's take a look at the Nasdaq Futures, and if you want to look at an instrument that trades similar to the Nasdaq Futures, you can look at the QQQ, the QQQs, the ETF. They track the Nasdaq Futures. So basically you have the same kind of scenario here. The Nasdaq Futures look a little bit weaker to me, but we've broken out of this wedge. On a day basis, it looked stronger on Friday, where it broke these highs a little bit more decisively. But in terms of the distance from a retest of its recent highs, it looks a little bit weaker overall, but it is basically following suit with the S&P future and with the Dow Futures. Now let's take a look at the same markets, but from the Darvish squeeze perspective. Here's the weekly chart of the Dow Futures. We have this. Let me just expand this out. On the weekly chart, we have this interesting setup taking place here, where you can see the MACD is crossing over to the high side. We have a weekly squeeze in play. The Hakanashis are blue, and we're approaching the top of this Darvish box. So we have a potential Darvish squeeze breakout to the long side on the weekly Dow Futures. That's going to be pretty significant. I'm going to be watching that pretty closely. It could take a week, more than, you know, I mean, this could happen in 1 week in one crazy move, you know, and anything can happen in this market. But this would be a multi-week event that I would be watching for direction outside of this weekly Darvish box. If we have this Darvish squeeze firing off, this could be a potentially huge move to break through the highs. I wouldn't be surprised if it happened, for the simple fact, or the simple reason, that I think it would catch a lot of people off guard. I don't think a lot of people are expecting a much higher move than what we've seen. So if we take a look then at the daily chart of the Dow Futures from this perspective, from the Darvish squeeze perspective, we did have a signal fire off. We did have a signal fire off back in here, back in this area here, and it pulled back, and now it's starting to follow through. So we could see, you know, we could see a push right up to the highs. I don't think that would be, you know, projecting this Darvish box out on a one-to-one basis would bring us right at a retest to the highs. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen. Everything else here looks bullish. You know, you've got a little bit of, the volume's a little bit weak, but you know, you want to see a little bit of the volume picking up. This is bullish. This is bullish. So you got your MACD bullish. You've got my trending indicator bullish. Everything looks good for a potential move higher there in the Dow Futures. So let's take a look at the sister indexes again. Here's the S&P future again. You don't have a weekly squeeze setting up, but you do have the MACD starting to cross higher. You have the trending indicator starting to move higher. I'm a little bit concerned about a potential divergence here if you know, where this is making a higher low, if this makes a higher high. So I'll be watching that. But you can see here on the daily chart kind of the same situation as the Dow Futures, where you have a Darvish squeeze that's fired off with a break above that Darvish box, and everything looks pretty bullish with potential targets up near a retest of these highs. So that looks really interesting. And let's take a quick look at the Nasdaq Futures. You know, you have all of these signals here, all of these signals on my Darvish squeeze here on the daily chart of all the indices on the stock index futures are all in alignment, and that's something that I like to see. I like to see that alignment come into play. It gives more of a, you know, gives kind of more evidence towards the theory that I'm looking for. So we had a long Darvish squeeze on the Nasdaq futures here. You know, we put in a low and we put in another higher low here, which I like to see as well, because it kind of gives energy and it gives that stair-stepping structure to kind of push off to the next, to put in the next, you know, crux or the next high of the stair. You know, so that's kind of what I'm looking at. Potential targets up near somewhere in and around these highs. Everything looks good as well. Everything seems to be in alignment. The indicator here, the trending indicator, is a little bit, you know, it's a little bit low. It's a little bit weak. But I'm kind of going by the price action and the signals that are firing. So this looks good. They're all in alignment. If they follow through, then we should potentially see a retest of those recent highs that I've been looking for the last few weeks. If we look at the transport index, nothing really much going on there, except you have this elongated Darvish squeeze setting up on the weekly chart. On the weekly chart, it's holding the MACD 0 line, so this is kind of interesting. We'll keep an eye on that as well. And that's basically all that I have this week. Everything, the story is just kind of playing out in the stock index futures, and now I'm just kind of looking to see if it's going to, you know, if it's going to see those recent highs back from, I believe it was the recent highs put in April, March and April, or actually the beginning of May, back in these areas here. So this is the beginning of May. These are the highs that were put in at the end of, you know, the middle to end of March, beginning of April. So after that, I don't really know. I'm just going to reassess. I'm kind of looking at those areas as a magnet and see if we're going to come up and tag those levels, and then kind of see from there what is actually coming into play. I believe this is as a result of quantitative easing or stimulus coming out mainly from Europe. There were some announcements coming out of Europe that they were going to support the markets, but from here we'll kind of see once and if we get a retest of these highs, we'll kind of just sit back and see where the price action wants to go from there. These are kind of interesting times, and I don't think it's really reasonable to kind of try to project my opinion or bias beyond that at this point in time. So I hope it helps. We've got a long weekend. I believe it's a civic holiday here in Canada this weekend. I hope you're having a great weekend and able to spend some time with your family. Enjoy the Monday off. I know the markets in the United States will be open for those who trade the U.S. markets. We'll look forward to getting back into the markets on a heavier basis on Tuesday. So have a great rest of weekend, and I hope this video helps, and we'll look forward to seeing you at another video update or at our next upcoming meetup at the end of this month. Bye for now.